slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up. I don't ever slow up, no I don't take shit. I got no love for the fakeness. If you wanna play tough and wanna hate this, I'll always show up and make a statement.
Hey team, I really wanted to talk on pacing yourself, and that's really the topic of this video, is pacing yourself in your races, because I've certainly made the mistake of trying to run way too aggressive early in my races, earlier in my career, running on the track. When I was in high school, I was trying to break 4 minutes for 1,600 meters. And the mistake I made, obviously, is I just simply did not have that type of leg speed when I was in high school. I mean, my best mile is 4 minutes and 22 seconds. The best 1,600 I ran in high school was 4:25. So I wasn't anywhere close to breaking 4 minutes for 1,600 meters. And I made the mistake of improperly pacing myself, going out and say like 60 seconds. I would do that several times in the first 400 meters of several of my 1,600 meter races when I was in high school. Okay, looking back, if I just would have went out and say 67 to 68 seconds, the first 400 meters, I probably would have at least finished my high school career running around maybe 4:16 to 4:17, 4:18 range for 1,600 meters rather than 4:25. So, and the same with many of my longer distance races on the roads. I've spent several races, especially the marathon, trying to run way too aggressive the first half of my marathons. I mean, I had several marathons, the 2007 Grandma's Marathon, an example. I went out the first half in 1:10:31, which at that time was my PR for the half marathon through the first half marathon of the race. I ended up running 2:40:02. At that time, that was a new personal record by about 3 minutes for the marathon. But again, I went from 1:10 through the half, going way too anaerobic, really struggling and not taking enough fluid in the race, which is another mistake I made. And so pacing yourself, running be smarter in your races, whether you're training for a 1,500 meter, try not to win the race in the first 800 meters of that race. Yes, it's quick. Yes, it's over in a matter of several minutes. But again, if you go way too anaerobic, you're going to ruin your time by the end of the race. It's even more critical to pace yourself, especially the longer the race. Okay, like I mentioned, these road races, 10 miles, 25Ks, 20Ks, half marathons or marathon races, you have to be more strategic. You have to think about, how can I run the least amount of distance? Run the tangents in the races. Okay, if there's a left-hand turn coming up, you don't need to be running on the right-hand side of the road, where you're running more distance than the athletes that are running on the left-hand side of the road. Okay, it's these little things. In a race like the half marathon or a race like the marathon, running a negative split is the way to go. In most cases, most world records, most personal bests that most athletes set, they're set because the athletes are trying to think to themselves prior to the start, maybe there's something you can do. It's just, hey man, I just want to get through the first half as relaxed as I can, but not go so aerobic, so run too easily, but get out aggressive, but not try to win this race in the first half. Try to get through the first half, and then once you get through the first half of your race, then make it if you're running a marathon, make it an all-out half marathon. Okay, if you're running a half marathon, get through the first 6.5 miles or so and say, okay, man, I just need to focus all of my efforts on running as hard as I can for the next 6.5 miles, rather than trying to run as hard as you can from the start of the race. Okay, so pacing yourself takes time. It takes trial and error. There's times where you're going to make mistakes. There's going to be times where you get too hyped up and you go too quick. You try to run someone else's race. The key thing to keep in mind is try to learn something from each race that you do. Don't continue to make the same mistakes. I think that pacing yourself and hydration are probably two of the most important concepts of middle distance to long distance success, especially in these longer races. again, it's one thing. It's easy to go out way too fast and to really suffer in the second half of a half marathon or a marathon or a 10-mile race. But if you're not taking enough fluid, that's why I always say make sure that you're practicing drinking. Drop your water bottles out or drop fluid out. Powerade, any type of fluid. Like I recommend Hoist and Electrolyte. Electrolyte I absolutely love. I'll leave links below this video if you want. Check those out. They're on Amazon. But there's so many other drinks out there. But you want to make sure that you have some electrolytes and you have some water out along your long run course. Practice drinking. Okay, you're not going to run a great marathon if you're not properly pacing yourself, like I said, and you're not taking enough calories in that race. Okay, especially in road races that require, where you're racing. Anything really 10K up to the marathon or even ultra marathon involves a high amount of your attention needs to be focused on your pace strategy, energy conservation, and taking in enough fluid and taking in enough calories. In a race like a 10-mile up to marathon, take some gels in that race. Okay, if you don't know, it's important to find out how much fluid your stomach can withstand. So when you're running those longer, faster, varied pace long runs, when you're running at paces that are closer to your goal marathon race pace, get accustomed to taking in some fluid and taking in some calories running at that particular intensity, so that again you get a better idea of what it feels like to be running at very fast anaerobic efforts, as well as taking in fluid and taking in some calories. It's one thing to do that when you're running very easy, but in a race situation, you're going to have to practice drinking, running at faster, running at race pace, as well as taking in some gels. Okay, so make sure you have at least 2 gels in your shorts prior to the start of the race. Some of these shorts, the Nike shorts that I have, there's a pocket on each side, and then there's a pocket on the back of the shorts as well. So I'll make sure to always have 3 gels in my shorts if I'm running like a half marathon or a marathon. And usually, again, in most races like a half marathon or marathon, they'll have a gel. They'll hand out another gel in the race, usually around mile 10 of a marathon or around mile 20 of a marathon. So make sure you take that as well. Okay, in these big races, if you're running these longer races, 10K to marathon, like I said, pace is critical, but hydration, if you're trying to run a marathon with the equivalent of consuming the equivalent of like 2 to 3 Dixie cups, you're not going to run a very strong marathon, because you're going to be very dehydrated, and it's going to happen too late. When you're really thirsty, you don't want to wait until it's too late, especially to take in fluid in these longer races. So make sure you're drinking, even if you have to stop at an aid station, at every aid station for a few seconds to drink 3 to 4, or maybe or even like at least 2 Dixie cups, full containers of fluid, rather than running by a station and grabbing a Dixie cup with half the contents of the cup being lost on the street. Okay, so don't make that mistake. I've made that mistake in the past, and it absolutely ruined some of my race performances. Okay, once I started really focusing on the importance of consuming enough fluid, enough gels, that's when I started getting better at running longer distances. And obviously, being a little bit more cautious in my races, especially in the first half. Like when I ran 2:19 for the marathon, I did a negative split, or I did a positive split. I went out the first half of my marathon in 1:07:09. I came back with a 1:12:26. But because I had put in an enormous amount of volume and I had put in some very, very aggressive training, I was able to handle that second half somewhat better, even though I drastically slowed. I went from 1:07:06 or 1:07:09 to 1:12:26. But I slowed down just somewhat less than in other races. In other races, like I said, I went out in like 1:08 or 1:09 and ended up running like a 2:32 or a 2:40 for the marathon. So again, it's much more, and looking back, if I just would have paced myself a little bit, been a little bit more conservative in the first half, I probably would have didn't run much better times. So do the very best you can to learn from your mistakes in your pacing, and pace yourself be a little bit more conservative in the first half and focus all of your attention on your hydration and running a negative split, finishing that second half faster than you run the first half. Hope this video was helpful for all of you. If you have any other questions, feel free to leave me a comment below. I'll definitely reach back out to you. And thank you so much for your support for all of my subscribers, whether you're new or old. And if you're looking to take your training and racing to the next level, definitely check out the resources on RunDreamAchieve.com. And I'll talk to you all in the next video.